Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to Talent Optimization. My name is Tracy Shirk, and today we are talking about how do we diagnose areas in our organization that maybe aren't working so well and then up-level and celebrate. One of the things that we know is that every single business problem in our organization is a people problem. So if you think about that, all those business problems, this could be blockages that are happening in your sales funnel. This could be things that are happening out on the production line with errors in products that are coming off. Whatever that is, it's a people problem. So when we look at it through that lens, how do we diagnose those things so we can up-level our people, our processes, and truly celebrate those key results? So we have a very special guest with us today, and I want to introduce you to Andrew Bartlow. Andrew has been playing in HR for 25 years. You know, he's really worked with organizations with maturity stages, many different industries. He's co-author of Scaling for Success, People Priorities from High Growth Organizations. And he leads Series B Consulting, which helps businesses to articulate their people strategy and accelerate their growth. So, Andrew, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Tracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'm curious, when we talk about diagnosing business problems inside of an organization and the fact that it's a people problem, what's that kind of first thing that comes to your mind?
I think that business problems are what a strategic HR organization is designed and intended to solve, right? They're not separate things. They're all linked. So an effective strategic HR organization will directly address your business problems. And heck, that's a big opportunity for a lot of HR leaders, is to get a little bit more business centric, be curious about the business, understand what the key priorities of that business are, and make sure that your people and HR agenda more directly supports it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and this is something that I often find myself talking with HR leaders about is, hey, what are your priorities? And they give me their priorities. And I say, hey, what's your CEO priorities? And they're like, right? Do you ever have that?
Oh, for sure. I have created a word called HRE. As I talk to some of my HR leader mentors, I ask them the same question. Hey, what are your priorities? What are you working on? And 90+% of the time, it's a bunch of internal facing HRE focused activities and initiatives that aren't as directly linked to what the business is focusing on right now as they could be. There are usually some logic leaps or kind of second and third degree stretches around what HR is working on versus what the business really cares about. Or even, to your point, a gap in knowledge around what the business cares the most about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that key alignment, you know, this is something that so often, like I'm doing a lot of conversations these days around succession planning and individualized development plans for individuals. And one of the key questions that keeps coming up is the knowledge drain as individuals leave the organization, whether expectedly or unexpectedly, and how do we ensure that we have that overlap? Now, that sounds like an HRE thing, yet at the same time, you know, at the top of the show, I mentioned, you know, we've got issues happening in production where the workflow isn't going all the way through, right? Well, that's a clear business problem because it's lowering, you know, what our deliverables are specifically for the day. But if we don't address the HR issue, which is that knowledge gap and the knowledge transfer, we're going to continue to have a business problem, right?
Yeah. Hey, one of the traps that a lot of HR professionals fall into is coming up with an HR solution and then searching for the problem that it solves.
Yeah.
I really encourage, HR leaders that intend to be strategic to start with understanding what those business priorities are, and then design your solutions rather than, what often happens with the other way around. So talk to your CEO and your executive team. What are the three most important things to you right now? Look at the most recent board deck or investor pitch deck if you've raised money recently. You can do a really simple SWOT analysis. If you're part of the executive meetings, if you truly have a seat at the table, then you'll at least hear what the group is talking about. What are incentive programs based on? Is it NOBIT? Is it EBITDA? Is it expansion? Is it top line revenue? What is the business trying to do? Once you understand that at least a foundational baseline level, then you can much more clearly tie the actions of your HR function to those most important business priorities.
Absolutely. And part of it is talking the same talk, right? Like ensuring that we're not using, the HR language, that we're using the business language to it. And advocacy is a significant piece of that. When we can say, here's the business problem, here's a potential solution that's a business solution, that will tie into the whole HR infrastructure, it allows us to move that forward. And it has to be a fit for your organization. And I know you've done a lot of this of like, how do we take, a best practice and right size it into what an organization needs?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite topics is, what our best practice is really best. And the answer is it depends. It depends on the context, and context is king. Like whatever Google happens to be doing might work for them, maybe not. Like they have the killer app and they have, a ridiculous profit margin. They can do a lot of stuff that might be ineffective, but they'll still be a successful company. But as an organization looks to replicate somebody else's best practice, I'm putting air quotes up right now, you really want to understand the context that that's happening in. And is it likely to work for you? Do you have the same situation that organization used that particular practice in or not? And hey, if you're not careful, you'll be using a screwdriver to try to pound in nails, or some other, you'll be eating your soup with a fork. So you want to be thoughtful about what tools and what practices you use and make sure that there's fit for purpose in your org.
Absolutely, because it could be the best tool in the world, but it doesn't mean that it's the right thing. And I don't know what the ad is, but it's the ad with the golf club hitting the bowling ball. But it's that kind of a thing, like a screwdriver for a nail. Like, are we using the right tool? And it doesn't just need to be the right tool for the right job, but it's also, are we using the right tool for our organization, for our industry, for those types of things? And there's a key distinction between remote work and in-person work as well. And that's been somewhat of a miss lately.
Yeah.
From what I've seen with my clients anyway.
Yeah. Well, hey, I think there's an analog to this, concept we talked about with HR people bringing solutions and then looking for a problem, where some business leaders will talk to their investors or, go away to a, CEO dinner and come up with some great idea, some great solution that then they want to implement in their organization without thinking about whether it's a great fit or not. Right. I remember one Monday morning where the CEO that I worked with wanted to go implement holacracy that week, which was a really interesting concept at Zappos back in the day, but wasn't necessarily the right fit for that business. And I had to use a lot of political capital with my CEO to talk him out of it. But yeah, be thoughtful, use some critical thinking. What's the right tool for the job?
Yeah. And I think, as we talk about diagnose, it's diagnosing what is the problem. We talked about where to start, with that is, ask and kind of follow that lead. But then, what should the HR function work on as far as the needs identification and prioritization?
I think there's a really critical question to start with. And that is, why does the HR organization exist? Like, let's start foundationally there. And I would suggest that at the baseline level, HR exists to help an organization meet its goals. Mm-hmm. Why do we exist? And there are a bunch of stakeholders involved in that, and different stakeholders may have different interests and different goals. But if you say we exist to help our org meet its goals, then the natural next question is, okay, so what are those goals? Who are our stakeholders and what do they care about? And so it's a fairly simple, this is kind of a mini MBA class we're walking through right now, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right.
If you ask the question as an HR leader, a listener to this podcast, who are my stakeholders, one, and what do they care most about? That can very quickly help to elicit what the most important things for your organization are. And then just think about a waterfall with, okay, well, these are the most important things to these groups. Maybe it's an investor, maybe it's CEO or exec team, maybe it's employees, maybe it's community or regulator or customers. You can start to tie your activities to those most important interests. And so what we're talking about right now is a stakeholder analysis, and you can do it on the back of a napkin. We're talking about a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you don't need a $1 million McKinsey study to do this stuff. You don't need an MBA or a professional degree to do this stuff. It's just finding the right question. And that question is, who are the people that I'm trying to serve? What do they care most about? And then what are the things that I can work on that can address those most important needs?
Right. Right. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. That's the baseline on diagnosis. It's just understanding what the needs are.
Right. And that's it, right? Then once we understand what the needs are, it's not always just going and saying, all right, this is the loudest thing. That's what I'm going to focus on. It's looking at that in perspective and context to say, here's the loudest thing, but what's the thing that's going to make the most impact on our business results in the least amount of time? Or what's the thing that's going to make the most impact on our business results with the least effort, right? Yeah. And sometimes you start there to get those things and to align the team around it, to commit to it and follow through with what that is.
Yeah, there's a saying that I'll use here, and I probably use too much. You can move 30 things an inch or 3 things a mile.
Right.
Right. And HR organizations often end up getting stretched way too thin by trying to serve everyone perfectly.
Right.
By, doing a lot of work on, whoever happens to have the most urgent need. We are a helping profession in many ways. And many of us come from a humanistic perspective, and we want to solve people's problems. And so problem pops up, whack that mole and, take care of it. That, I think, is one of the larger reasons a lot of HR professionals burn out the way that we do, because we're trying to please everybody. And bottom line is, you just can't. You've got to prioritize to a certain point. And so understanding who your most important stakeholders are and what they care most about can help you differentiate the big rocks from the gravel, from the sand.
For
and
sure.
That's a reference back to 7 Habits, Stephen Covey. If you can get your big rocks identified and take care of them first, then all the other customer service type stuff will fill in between. But if you're doing all the customer service stuff and you never get to the big rocks, then chances are you're not going to be wildly successful.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely, for sure. So as we start to kind of wrap up today, because we've covered a ton of ground here and what we've gone through. So I'm curious, what's one kind of key takeaway for executives listening in today?
Yeah, if you're an HR executive, I would strongly suggest start from a place of curiosity and do your best to understand what the most important goals of your business are right now. And that will be your guiding light in terms of your priorities and initiatives in HR. Don't come with your solutions looking for a problem to solve. Start with what your CEO and your board and your investors are trying to drive, and make sure that you're doing something directly and meaningfully to support progress in those areas.
Absolutely. And what about for HR professionals listening in today? What's a takeaway that you have for them?
Yeah, well, that bit of advice was, for sure for HR professionals. I think it's I think I just wanted to share some empathy and some support for HR professionals that get stretched so thin, that are burning the candle at both ends, trying to serve all of these constituents. And I would just encourage HR professionals to have an understanding of their role in such that you want to do the most good that you possibly can. And that's not necessarily serving the most people with the smallest delivery tasks. It's the big ticket items that can make a real difference for an organization. So I would encourage HR professionals to think big around the potential impact that they have on an organization and be a little easier, more gentle on themselves.
Yeah. This word grace, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Awesome. Well, if you are interested in learning more about Andrew, he has a program called the People Leader Accelerator that he works specifically with, HR professionals in an executive development program. There's some short sprints, some shorter versions that you will see as well within that. And so if that's something that you're potentially interested in, we will have all of that information in our show notes as well. So Andrew, thank you so much for being with us today.
Really appreciate the conversation, Tracy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great day, and we cannot wait to see you, have you hear us next week. And if you are interested in our membership program, again, our membership program is a monthly live program. We meet every Monday at 1:00 Central, where we have 3 key HR questions that we bring up weekly that are timely and then are there to answer your questions. So if you are interested in that, you can also find out how to sign up for that in our show notes. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap, called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.